The day they filmed the funeral in the desert, the young soldier's bugle trembled as he brought it to his lips, the note cracked, and John Wayne stopped walking. Monument Valley, Utah. August 1968. The sun hung merciless in a cloudless sky. Temperature pushing 105 degrees. The kind of heat that made mirages dance on the horizon and turn every breath into work. They were shooting a scene for The Undefeated, a western about Union and Confederate soldiers finding common ground after the Civil War. Simple premise. Complex execution. John Wayne playing Colonel John Henry Thomas, a Union cavalry officer trying to keep his men alive in a world that had moved on without them. This particular scene was a funeral. A soldier being laid to rest in hostile territory. The script called for taps to be played. 24 notes. The most recognizable bugle call in American military tradition. The sound of honor, sacrifice, and goodbye. The film's music department had hired a young Marine named Danny Reeves to play it. He was 22 years old, fresh back from Vietnam, honorably discharged after taking shrapnel in his left shoulder. The Marines had taught him bugle as part of his ceremonial duties. He'd played taps at 17 military funerals in Da Nang before his injuries sent him home. Director Andrew McLaglen had thought it would add authenticity, a real Marine playing the call on a film about soldiers. Danny had arrived on set that morning in his dress blues, bugle polished to a mirror shine, trying to hide the tremor in his left hand that hadn't stopped since Vietnam. The scene was blocked simply. A wooden coffin draped with an American flag. Wayne and a group of actors playing his men standing at attention. Danny positioned 20 yards away, silhouetted against the desert sky. When McLaglen called action, Danny would play taps. Wayne would salute. Credits would eventually roll over this image months later in theaters across America. They'd rehearsed it once that morning. Danny had played it perfectly. Clean, clear, controlled. McLaglen had been thrilled. "That's the sound right there," he'd said. "That's what we need." But that was before the cameras rolled. Before the pressure of 20 film crew members watching. Before John Wayne stood there in full costume, hat in hand, waiting. McLaglen called for quiet on set. The kind of silence that only happens in the desert, absolute, oppressive, waiting. "Pictures up," the first assistant director announced. "Roll sound. Speed. Roll camera." "Rolling." McLaglen looked at Danny. "Whenever you're ready, son." Danny raised the bugle to his lips. His left hand was shaking. Not much. Just enough that his fingers couldn't quite steady against the valves. He tried to compensate. Took a breath. Started the call. The first note came out wrong. Thin. Wavering. Not the clear, pure tone taps requires. The crack was audible across the entire set. Danny's face flushed. He lowered the bugle slightly, started to apologize. "Keep going," McLaglen called out. "We'll fix it in post." Danny tried the second note. It cracked worse than the first. That's when John Wayne stopped. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Wayne had been standing at attention, eyes forward, playing the scene exactly as blocked. But when that second note cracked, his jaw tightened. His eyes closed briefly. And then he did something not in the script, not in the blocking, not in any discussion they'd had. He stepped out of frame. Walked directly toward Danny Reeves. The camera operator looked at McLaglen, confused. McLaglen held up his hand, "Keep rolling." Wayne crossed the 20 yards of desert in steady, measured steps. His boots crunched on the hardpan. He wasn't moving fast. Wasn't rushing. But there was purpose in every stride. Danny saw him coming. The young Marine's eyes went wide. He lowered the bugle completely, came to rigid attention. "Mr. Wayne, I'm sorry, I can make it work, I just need." Wayne stopped directly in front of him. Close enough that Danny could see the lines around Wayne's eyes, the sweat on his forehead, the 61 years of living in that weathered face. Wayne didn't say anything at first. He just looked at Danny. Really looked at him. At the tremor in the young man's left hand. At the way Danny was holding his shoulder slightly higher than his right, compensating for old pain. At the dress blues that fit a little looser than they should because Danny had lost weight since getting home. "How long you been back?" Wayne asked quietly. "4 months, sir." "Where were you?" "Da Nang. 1st Marine Division." Wayne nodded slowly. "How many times you played this call?" Danny swallowed hard. 17 funerals, sir. Before I got hit. And since you got back? This is the first time I've picked up the bugle since the hospital. The set was completely silent. The entire crew watching this exchange. McLaglen had lowered his megaphone, sensing something was happening that was bigger than the film. Wayne held out his right hand. "May I?" Danny handed him the bugle, confused. Wayne turned it over in his hands. Examined it. The brass was old, well-maintained but worn from use. There was a small dent near the bell. Wayne's thumb traced it. "My father played bugle," Wayne said, still looking at the instrument. "First World War. Came home in 1919. Tried to play at a veteran's funeral in 1920 and couldn't get through it. Shook so bad he had to stop halfway through. He was ashamed of that for the rest of his life." He handed the bugle back to Danny. "He shouldn't have been," Wayne continued. "Because the shaking wasn't weakness. It was memory. It was every funeral he played in France, every friend he buried, every time he had to stand there and send another boy off with 24 notes. Your hand shakes because it remembers what those notes mean." Danny's eyes were filling with tears. "I can't do it, Mr. Wayne. I thought I could, but I can't." Wayne looked back at the coffin on the set. At the flag draped over it. At the scene they were supposed to be filming about honoring the dead. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. "Andrew," Wayne called out to McLaglen, not turning around. "Change of plan." McLaglen stepped closer. "What are you thinking, Duke?" "I'm thinking we don't need perfect taps for this scene," Wayne said. "We need real taps. The kind that comes from someone who knows what that flag means." He turned back to Danny. "You played this call 17 times for real. You honored 17 actual soldiers. Every note you played mattered to somebody's mother, somebody's wife, somebody's children. That's not something you fake for a movie." Wayne paused, letting that settle. "But I also know you can't do it alone right now. And you shouldn't have to." Wayne looked at the Marine in his dress blues, the bugle in his shaking hands, and made a decision. "So we're going to do it together." Danny looked confused. "I don't understand." Wayne placed his hand on Danny's left shoulder. "Not roughly. Gently. The way you'd steady something precious that was about to fall." "You play the call," Wayne said. "I'll stand right here. My hand on your shoulder. And every time you feel that shake starting to take over, you remember you're not alone. You remember that every man who ever came home from war had to figure out how to live with what he carried. And you remember that there's no shame in needing someone to stand with you while you do it. Subscribe and leave a comment. Because the most important part of this story is still unfolding." McLaglen had tears on his face. The script supervisor was crying. Half the crew had to turn away. "Everybody back to one," McLaglen called out, his voice thick. "We're doing this scene again. But this time, Duke stays in frame. Danny plays the call. And we shoot it however it comes out." The crew reset. Wayne walked back to his mark with Danny. Positioned the young Marine where he needed to stand. Then took his place beside him, one hand resting on Danny's shoulder. "Action," McLaglen called quietly. Danny raised the bugle to his lips. The first note was still imperfect. Still carried that slight waver. But it was clearer than before. Stronger. Wayne's hand tightened slightly on Danny's shoulder. The second note rang out across the desert. Better. The third. The fourth. Danny's hand was still shaking, but Wayne's presence, that steady pressure on his shoulder, was like an anchor. Something solid to hold on to while the memories tried to pull him under. Note by note, Danny played through the call. Not perfectly. There were wavers. There were moments where the tone wasn't quite pure. But there was something else there too. Something that perfect notes could never capture. There was truth. When the final note faded into the desert silence, Wayne didn't move his hand immediately. He kept it there on Danny's shoulder for a long moment. Squeezed once. Then finally stepped back and rendered a slow, deliberate salute. Not to the camera. To Danny Reeves. The young Marine's composure finally broke. He lowered the bugle and wept. Wayne caught him before he fell. Pulled him into an embrace right there in front of the cameras, the crew, everyone. John Wayne, the icon of American masculinity, holding a crying Marine and letting him shake apart. "You did good, son," Wayne said quietly, just loud enough for the boom microphone to catch. "You honored them. All 17. And whoever we're pretending is in that box for this movie." But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. McLaglen didn't yell cut. He let the cameras keep rolling. Let them capture Wayne holding this young man. Let them capture something real in the middle of manufactured entertainment. When Danny finally composed himself enough to step back, Wayne kept one hand on his shoulder. "You know what we're going to do," Wayne said. "We're going to keep that take. Every imperfect note. Every waver. Every moment where your hand shook. Because that's what real sounds like. And I'm tired of pretending." He turned to McLaglen. "That's the take we use. Don't fix it in post. Don't smooth it out. Let people hear what it actually sounds like when someone who understands the cost plays taps." McLaglen nodded, unable to speak. Wayne looked back at Danny. "You keep that bugle. Don't put it away again. And the next time someone asks you to play, you remember, the shaking isn't weakness. It's proof you were there. Proof you cared enough for it to cost you something. The scene that made it into The Undefeated is different from what was written. In the final film, you can hear the imperfection in the bugle call. You can see John Wayne standing beside a young man in dress blues, hand on his shoulder. And if you're paying attention, if you really watch Wayne's face, you can see the moment when he stops being a movie star and becomes something else entirely. Someone who understands. After that day, Wayne made a request of every director he worked with. If a scene required military music, hire actual veterans to play it. No session musicians. No Hollywood professionals. Men who had earned the right to play those notes. Danny Reeves kept the bugle. He went on to play taps at veteran funerals across California for the next 40 years. Every time his hand started to shake, he'd remember John Wayne's hand on his shoulder. The steadiness. The permission to be imperfect. In 1979, when John Wayne died of cancer, Danny was one of 12 buglers who played at memorial services across the country. He was assigned to a small ceremony in Orange County. When he raised his bugle that day, his hand shook worse than it had in Monument Valley 11 years earlier. But he played anyway. Every imperfect note. For the man who had taught him that strength isn't about not shaking, it's about playing the call anyway. Wayne never spoke publicly about what happened that day in the desert. Didn't mention it in interviews. Didn't use it to polish his image. That wasn't the point. The point was a young Marine who needed someone to stand with him, and an old cowboy who understood that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you can't do something alone. The original bugle Danny used that day, the one Wayne held and examined and handed back, is now in the National Museum of the Marine Corps. Next to it is a photograph from the set, John Wayne's hand on Danny's shoulder, both men silhouetted against the desert sky. The plaque beneath it reads simply, "Taps, Monument Valley, 1968. Some notes are worth the shaking." Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Wayne made 50 more films before cancer took him. But the people who were there that day in Monument Valley, the crew, the actors, McLaglen, all said the same thing. They never saw John Wayne more himself than in that moment when he stopped being the Duke and became just a man who understood what it meant to carry weight you couldn't put down. The imperfect tap stayed in the film. You can still hear it if you watch closely. And if you know the story behind it, you'll understand why those wavering notes matter more than perfect ever could.